2. Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. A pleasure to have this guy on. I've met him several times. I've had him on at various Super Bowls, but this is a real treat to have him on as Lamar Jackson comes in. He coached throughout the National Football League, coached in the collegiate ranks, has done radio, television. He's a friend of Chris Pike and Kevin Byrne. Longtime NFL coach, now doing things out in Indianapolis with the Colts on their website as well as the radio network. We welcome Rick Venturi back on, who, the legend is you packed the bags to move the Mayflowers to Indianapolis. I'm going to stick with that legend, Coach.
You can stick with it. I guess the actual job that I was given that awful night, I actually did take all the blackboards down with a screwdriver. That was my job on just an awful, awful night. I had just, after 2 years, I was just really beginning to enjoy the Baltimore area. The harbor was going big then. The Orioles were on top of the world. We were probably the only thing that was lagging, but I was really getting to really enjoy it. And at that stage in my career, 2 years in, it was a fun experience.
Well, you went off with Ernie Accorsi amongst others, and Kevin Byrne, and then you wound up with the Saints and the Rams. You did a lot of time trying to defense quarterbacks. Rarely, maybe some Michael Vick mixed in there, maybe even some Steve Grogan back in there. You weren't around then, but earlier than that, Steve Young. This Lamar thing, I wanted to reach to you and people like you because this would be the worst nightmare, the kind of player you could stick in that nobody can catch until you catch him, right?
No, there's no question about it, Nestor. Somebody asked me my 5 biggest nightmares from a coaching standpoint. One was John Elway, who has some of the similarities in Elway's prime. He was a guy that would extend plays and go beyond the playbook. Mike Vick came in and was a tremendous phenomenon. I mean, I was in New Orleans at the time. We actually had to change our deal for him. The thing about it is, though, is Elway was truly a traditional quarterback in an NFL sense with movement ability. Mike Vick was really an athlete playing quarterback he had a big arm, but he didn't have refined skills. So you could catch up to those guys at a point because, there was some hole in the game, not so much with Elway, but some hole. Lamar Jackson is your worst nightmare as a defensive coordinator. In the year 2009, John Gruden had just been fired at Tampa, and we had been let go in St. Louis. And I spent a year with John in Tampa because I lived there half the year. And John at that point didn't know if he was going to come back as a coach in the NFL or college. So we went to look at all the college offenses at the time. This is 2009 now. And we looked and we studied, and they were just the biggest headache for me in the world. And I remember saying to John, if you keep making me study this, I'm going to go back over to the beach and play shuffleboard because it was a real headache and nobody was really doing it in the NFL. And, the early guys like RG3, who you have, and Kaepernick, they were great athletes, but not refined passers. I mean, they had arms, but not refined passers. And so I always thought, well, we can still load up on those teams. We can essentially play 11 up, and survive. What I worried about was that guy that would come in and could play Clemson University or Louisville University offense on first down and then become a Bill Walsh West Coast guy on second and third down. And that has happened. That transition has happened, led by Jackson. Obviously, you saw Watson. I think he's right there. And I haven't really seen Murray live, but it sounds like he's that guy.
Well, Russell Wilson and Colin Kaepernick were, part of that 5 years ago, right?
That's exactly right. And Russell was too. But I would say that Russell was more of a classic, and Russell will be right in there with Lamar for the MVP thing. Don't catch me wrong. But Kaepernick was a lot like RG3. They were athletes first, passers second. I think Russell is a traditional, more like an Elway, more traditional NFL quarterback that can move. Jackson combines the collegiate offense with the pro passing game. And I saw it 2 years ago. Remember, you guys came into Indianapolis, and I was able to watch it in training camp. And I said right off the bat, this kid has a smooth delivery. He wasn't ready then. He had to refine out. He wasn't as accurate. But I said that kid has this compact delivery. He's going to be that guy that is going to give you headaches like Deshaun Watson. And what I think John, who's the most underrated coach in the National Football League, has done very smartly, by having Roman in there, he's got a guy who really understands that pedigree. I mean, he had Kaepernick. Look what he got out of Kaepernick at San Francisco. It was absolutely amazing. Now he's got this kid with the ability to run like that even better. But then he has a kid who now can throw the football pretty damn well. And that then becomes your worst nightmare as a defensive coordinator, because what Lamar Jackson does to you, which we didn't worry about for 100 years here. I had a college background that you worried about it, but not in pro football, is he adds gaps to the defense. We normally think of 7 gaps, A, B, C, and the edges. Well, anytime that he is around the football, he adds gap 8 and gap 9, because he's capable of taking it at any down. And when he takes it, it isn't a 5-yard and slide. I mean, he breaks so many legs, I can't believe it. The 39-yard run last week, and you guys, that's just normal for you now watching him, is just absolutely unbelievable. I told my grandson this morning, you better have a fence around him, because if you think you're going to tackle him one-on-one, you're crazy. But what's been impressive, and that's good usage too, because you could have a kid like that and not use him correctly and try to fix him into a certain old type of offense, and they haven't done that. And that's where I give John and Roman credit on that. But the thing that I think that I've really seen him grow and continue to grow is that delivery, that accuracy is there. And yes, in fact, he is just, I tell you what, he's a defensive coach's nightmare. I'm real happy when I watch him play that I'm in the booth, not down on the field trying to stop it. And I think to the Ravens' credit, and, they have a great pedigree, going back to Ozzie and now DeCosta, and, Kevin Byrne, those guys, George Kokinis, all those guys I'm tight with. They know how to draft. They're not successful by accident. And the one thing that I thought that the Ravens had lacked for a long time was just that explosiveness outside. They've always had the tight ends, but never those guys that could really run and stretch the field, so you could kind of sit on them in a way. But in the last couple of years, they've really gone out and drafted or signed guys that have really changed that. And what's really kind of interesting when you look at them is that this is not your father's Baltimore Ravens. Now, this is a team that is tremendously explosive. The quarterback has the 3rd best QBR in the league. And, it's a good defense. It's a team defense, but it isn't anything like those early 2000 defenses that were, Hall of Fame category. But they play good as a team. They keep the point total down. They're regardless of the other statistics, the only one that matters is they're number 6, holding teams to 19.6. Anytime today that you're holding people under 20, that's big time defense. And Nestor, I look at 3 things before I start watching tape on a team when I'm getting ready for the Colt games. I look at 3 things. 3 statistics are really important to me. Number 1 is your points given up, and that's an indictment on your defense. But it's also it also has to do with your turnovers, your special teams, and they're sitting there 6. And then the turnover differential, the +6, so they're sitting there, I think, 3rd. And then the QBR, he is number 3. So the 3 statistics that I look at that are most important to me, they're elite. So this is right now, this looks like certainly the best team in the AFC. I'm not as adept with the NFC yet, but definitely in the AFC.
Rick Venturi is our guest, a former coach of the Baltimore Colts, as well as many, many other teams. Made some time out in St. Louis with the Rams and has been in Indianapolis doing radio there as well as media there and out at Colts.com as well, and always famous for helping pack up Owings Mills back in the night of the Mayflowers. Coach, you said a bunch of stuff, and I'm here taking notes because I sit at the front of class. Refined skills. We talk about James James Urban, and we talk about refined skills in a quarterback, that scares you, and you talk about Michael Vick being more raw, or other quarterbacks maybe not being able to read defense, to, even if they've got a cannon. Identification, moving players around, knowing how to take a hit. I mean, Cam Newton thought he was going to, barrel through defenses, and look at what happened to his career. There's got to be a part that if you're running an organization, it takes incredible courage to move in this direction where a quarterback is going to find and seek at points contact, right? Who's not built like Cam Newton. But more than that, the refined skills allow you to not have to do that, right?
No, I think that's right. And, and again, I have to take my hat off to the Ravens, because there was no question about Lamar's athleticism. But even some of the gurus in the NFL, didn't feel like he was going to be a top quality quarterback. I remember those arguments. Now, I had a little advantage. I had actually seen him at Louisville play against Purdue and put on a one-man show that I couldn't believe. So I was extremely high on him. But, you just
now, when you say extremely high, I mean, come on, you played this game high, like top 5 pick, top 10 pick. What point, I mean, would you have dealt into the first round to pick him a year and a half ago and turn your whole? Could you sell that to an owner?
I would have had trouble selling him as a lottery pick. And I'm not sure I believe that, to be honest with you. I'm not sure that I believe that his accuracy was at that level. I did love his delivery. I thought that the potential was there. Sometimes you can look at a guy and you can look at that delivery and you can say that's going to be a problem forever. I liked his compact release. I thought he threw extremely easy. Very hard to evaluate pinpoint accuracy in the college game today because it's such a different game than the pro game. You're throwing into much bigger windows. I say it's a picture window on Saturday. It's a small portal on Sunday, and that's the difference. Well, the thing that you said is obviously he's very smart. He's been able to pick it up. He's got leadership. He moves people around. But here's the combination. Here's the problem that you have as a defensive coordinator. As I said, I'm no longer stopping 7 gaps. I'm stopping 9 gaps. So my secondary has to be tuned to the edge. I mean, if I've got to have safeties that can come up quickly, and or corners, whichever, I've got to have guys very close to the line of scrimmage because you can't give him any daylight. So that means I have to compress my defense. Now, if you're playing athlete first and kind of a throw-in passer, you could get by with that. And my point was that's what you could do early. That's what you could do around 2010, 2012. Now the problem is you do that, you've got guys wide open. I mean, he made 2 terrific throws down in the hole for touchdowns Sunday. I mean, right over the middle. And what I'm saying is now what the nightmare is that you're defending more gaps, and so you're stretching your defense or thinning it out as far as the back end, but now you've got a guy that can throw it. I mean, what's he got? 19 touchdowns. I mean, he's accounted for 25 touchdowns. So, yeah, I'm going to go back to that first thing you said, and I'm going to agree with you totally. He is a tremendous nightmare, and I give the Ravens credit for, one, bringing him along at the right pace, and then number 2, totally adapting to him and making it a quarterback-centric, almost like a collegiate offense, having the courage to do that. A lot of coaches can't do that. And I give John and Romans credit on that. There's no doubt about it. And they've changed the whole look of the ball club.
He is Rick Venturi. He is out in Indianapolis. You've had an interesting week because they're taking on Houston this week, so you've done a little scouting on that game. I mean, what we're seeing from the Seattle game through the New England game, and obliterating Cincinnati, Miami, you get that tape, and how bad they looked against Cleveland. The complimentary part of this, coach, is that the defense has come on, and I give a nod to Eric DeCosta and Ozzie Newsome. I've sent Eric some text saying you should be executive of the year when you consider how bad they were getting pushed around back in September, and they had no pass rush, to going out on the street and bringing in Josh Bynes, who we had at Adams Jeep on Monday night to do a second turn of duty here L.J. Fort, now they've signed him. Then the Marcus Peters trade, and we're going to have him on our side of the field as we go out to the L.A. Memorial Coliseum on Monday night with my sunglasses in Hollywood for an 8-2 start. And it's fun. But then even last week, Damata Pecco, and they pick up Ellis. This has been sort of out of the Belichickian school of, hey, when you're good, let's get some depth, let's fortify things, let's find some guys who can still play, who are going to want to be on our team and help us stop the run, because this defensive thing has really come together under Wink, and bringing in smart guys. Earl Thomas, because it didn't really work for Earl earlier in the year, but Earl's getting a little more comfortable right now, and obviously Marcus Peters coming in, Jimmy Smith coming back. There's a lot of talent on this defensive side that physically wasn't even in the organization 8-10 weeks ago.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I think they've done a tremendous job both in basically supplementing that as they go. And I think Wink has done a really good job. I thought he had a great plan against Houston last week. I know Houston, the 7-sack game was a credit to the ball club, but it was also a credit to the plan. They choked off the passing game. They never let the kid get running. They did a real good job, kind of a Belichickian, if you way, and they kept him in the well. They kept him in the well, and that's where that kid struggles. And the sacks didn't come necessarily from firing upfield and running around. They came from keeping him condensed and then getting second effort off the blocks to him. This is not when you look at it from the outside, you remember the Ray Lewis and Suggs and, all the great front seven guys, Nada, that they've had over the years that were just dominating guys that were, MVPs of the league. And you don't see necessarily those ambient guys up front, but what you see is a bunch of really good football players with, Judon probably being the guy that you have to scheme the most for on the edge. But it's a really good front seven that is doing a good job against the run. But I think that I really like the secondary. Of course, I've always really liked Humphreys. Nick Saban and I are good friends. I loved him coming out. Great move with Peters. So now what you do, you can afford to load the box because you've got two corners that can hold up on the outside, which is amazing. And that's such a lost art. People always talk about rushers, and really, even when you look at Belichick, they've turned it around because they've gone out and gotten corners, and that's what you have. And, of course, I'm going to tell you this. I've known him since he was a kid at Texas, and Earl Thomas is absolutely one of my most favorite players because he has not only, and he's not quite the Earl Thomas that he was early. Early, he was one of the greatest athletes at safety ever to play this game, probably the best Hawk with the exception of your other guy, Reed, that I've seen athletically. But Earl brings a special brand. He's tremendous instincts, ball hawking ability, and he has a quiet kind of that small-town Texan charisma that he brings to the game. So that is an outstanding secondary, not to be overrated, and it's a front seven that just plays well together. They are playing very smart. And like I said, the only statistic that really, really matters is points given up, and they're sitting there at 6 at 19-6.
Rick Venturi's been around the game for, going on 5 decades or thereabouts, from Indianapolis and Baltimore to Cleveland and New Orleans and the St. Louis Rams now, doing some stuff out at the Colts.com and also at the 1070 out in Indianapolis where they have combines and football teams. The AFC just in general, Coach, we're sitting around. We've never been number one in the power rankings here in Baltimore. Maybe not going back to Burt Jones in the 70s, but, around here we've not had the best team. We had Ray Lewis. We had our defenses, but we were always sort of chasing the Steelers, chasing the Bengals during the Marvin era many, many times. This is sort of a rarefied air, and to have this sort of Michael Jordan having the media descend, reaching out to people like you that are giving praise to this kid, it's a very interesting time for whatever the power is going to be in the AFC, because it certainly feels like a Patriots-Ravens world coming down the line in January, doesn't it?
No, it really does. And, obviously, when you're defensive-oriented like the great Ravens team have been over the years, it's a little bit like the Colts are right now. They don't have the defense what you had in the early 2000s, but this is a very good Colt defense that runs the football. It isn't your father's Colts team. But when you're defensive oriented, you're not going to get that power rating. The only way you're going to get that power rating is to show that you're explosive, and it's also very quarterback-centric. I think the AFC is really up for grabs. I think Baltimore right now is the clear favorite. I think they're the clear favorite because of the total package and the uniqueness of Lamar Jackson. But there's no other team that you can put up there on those three stats that I talked about that can rank with them. And I do think the advantage, now a lot's going to be determined over here tomorrow night. I mean, the Colts and Houston play. If the Colts win, you know, they will emerge from the South. If Houston wins, it'll go the other way. Somebody said there's a 47% swing on mathematically on who wins that game tomorrow night, but one of those two teams is coming out. Neither is perfect. And I do think the one thing that I've always felt, I don't know that I have empirical evidence other than some critical games, is I've always felt like the Ravens really, have never been in awe of the Patriots. I think there are times that, the Patriots basically can beat teams who, play the myth rather than the team. I've always felt like that the Ravens, credit to John, just always just treat them like another team and have beaten them so many times, in critical spots and have a physicality about them. So, I think that really bodes well right now for the Ravens.
It might be our time. Rick Venturi heading out to Cali. Are you the second most famous person in Rockville or Rockford, or would it be Cheap Trick? Which one?
Well, believe it or not, it's my brother-in-law lives right next door to the lead of Cheap Trick. So, I would have to say I'm probably second.
All right, I'll make sure. I'll let Rick Nielsen know that. I saw that you were from Rockford, Illinois, and, I love Cheap Trick, so I'm figuring you had to have seen Cheap Trick in a club sometime back in your day. You know what I mean?
Okay, I love it. My wife is from Rockford. I spent my high school there. My dad was a Hall of Fame high school coach, if you may or may not know, and we did a lot of moving around. He was always in demand, so we're there. But matter of fact, I was just back to Rockford the other day. But old Cheap Trick is right at it.
Yeah, I got my oil change one time in Rockford driving to Milwaukee. So, hey, man, I appreciate you coming on and taking a little time, and I love talking football with you. We'll send everybody out to Colts.com, keep up with you. Hope to see you out there at the Combine in a couple months, all right?
All right, Nestor, have a good one.
Coach Rick Venturi joining us here from Indianapolis, Indiana, although he originally packed up the blackboards and put them into the Mayflower vans. He's part of Colt lore and Baltimore football lore, and great to have him tell us about chasing Lamar Jackson around. We'll be chasing Lamar Jackson all the way to the L.A. Memorial Coliseum. Luke is out on the backfields at Owings Mills as we prepare for a big football game, Monday Night Football. Booger McFarland. Big doings. I'm going to have some Korean barbecue out in the parking lot. Looking for some sunshine in L.A., looking for our 9th victory in time for Thanksgiving. It's going to be a beautiful week around here. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'll be out on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram and doing all of that fun stuff on social as I go west to Los Angeles. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Baltimore Positive, and we never stop talking Baltimore good stuff.